Hi, I'm Ljerka Ostojic, and I'd like to give you a couple of main takeaway messages from a survey study in which we asked researchers in animal cognition about their thoughts and experiences with bias. And this is work that has been led by Benjamin Farrar as part of his PhD project. Now, animal cognition is a field that has a long tradition of critically assessing its methods and approaches, and quite a lot of those critiques revolve around the question of bias. But when we look at the published literature on this, then mostly what we have is the perspective of a few selected researchers and scholars. What is mostly hidden from our view is the perspective of the many researchers working in that field. And this is exactly the gap that we set out to close in the survey. Now, to do this, Ben extracted first, last, and corresponding authors on papers published in major animal cognition journals in the last 3 years. He sent out 969 emails and received 210 replies. So 210 researchers responded to our survey, and the survey itself was organized in 5 thematic blocks. And each block involved both rating questions, but also had spaces for free text answers. And it is these free text answers that really proved most informative to us. For today's presentation, we'll mostly look at the first 2 thematic blocks, namely questions about general bias and publications. So when it comes to general bias, this figure summarizes the pattern of results quite nicely. What we see is that researchers identified situations and potential pressures that could lead to situations in which there is scope for bias to impact research outcomes. However, at the same time, they seem to be relatively confident that they can detach themselves from such biases. Another interesting thing that we found is that there was a divergence in the answers when researchers answered questions about bias about themselves and when they answered questions about other researchers in the field. And so what we saw here is that they reported that potentially the work of others is more impacted by bias than their own work. When it comes to publications, what we see is that researchers said that they published around 80% of their studies, but there was actually quite a lot of variation in these answers. So we had 23% of researchers who also said that they published fewer than 50% of their studies. As we see from the table here, the types of reasons that were given for this were quite varied. One of the things that we can highlight is what is usually known in the literature as publication bias, namely that it is difficult to publish negative results. On the one hand, researchers said that this was journal enforced, but other researchers also said that they themselves wouldn't send negative results out to journals to consider them for publication, because they were aware that it was more difficult to know what exactly those negative results mean. And so quite a lot of researchers voiced concern about how to interpret negative results, and also said that they would rather wait until they conducted some follow-up studies in which they conducted more methodological controls that may help them to figure out what the negative results mean. Another journal-enforced bias that some of the researchers voiced was that sometimes they encountered situations in which it was difficult to publish results that went against the theoretical kind of standpoint or perspective of reviewers. And a final thing that I would like to illustrate or highlight is that quite a lot of researchers said that they didn't publish some of their studies because of lack of time. So what do these results mean? Well, the first thing that we have to be careful about is that we don't think that we can take these numerical values that we're presenting here as the exact prevalence of the different perspectives within our field. And this is because the sample that replied to our survey is a self-selected sample, and very likely those were researchers that were already concerned about these sort of questions, or at least are interested in them. So what can we take from that? Well, we think that the results show a direct evidence of publication bias. We also think that we can gain some quite nice and interesting insights into the concerns regarding bias in the published literature, as well as the barriers that researchers face when conducting the research and when wanting to publish it. So what we're really hoping is that some of these responses can inform future debates within our field.